Viking noblewomen are often portrayed as independent and influential, managing households and even wielding political sway. On the surface, their lives seem enviable. They lived in large longhouses, dressed in fine garments, and were respected in their communities. Archaeological finds show elaborate jewelry, imported goods, and weapons buried alongside some women, hinting at their status. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath this veneer of wealth and power lay a rigid societal structure that strictly limited women's autonomy. Even those born into privilege were bound by rules designed to serve male-dominated hierarchy. Wealth and status offered protection, but not freedom. Noblewomen were expected to maintain family honor, manage estates, and secure the clan's future through strategic marriages. Their influence was conditional, tied to their usefulness in maintaining alliances and producing heirs. Any deviation from expected roles could lead to social ostracism or worse. In essence, power for Viking women was a double-edged sword. While they could wield influence in subtle ways, they remained subject to forces beyond their control. The glimmer of authority they appeared to hold was largely symbolic, masking the very real restrictions placed on their lives. From the moment a girl was born into a noble Viking family, her future was largely determined by her gender and her family's ambitions. Boys were raised to fight, lead, and inherit lands, while girls were groomed to secure alliances and maintain the family's standing. Education for noblewomen often included skills like weaving, managing a household, and understanding social rituals, preparing them for marriage and domestic leadership rather than personal freedom. Families would assess their daughters for traits desirable in a political bride: health, beauty, intelligence, and temperament. In many cases, marriages were arranged at a very young age, sometimes even in infancy, to cement alliances between clans or strengthen claims to territory. The girl's personal wishes or desires were rarely considered. Stories from sagas reveal instances of daughters being sent to distant lands to marry men they had never met, entering households where they had no friends or family to support them. The pressure to conform from such a young age shaped the identity and expectations of these women, teaching obedience, patience, and resilience. By understanding the constraints of their early life, we can see how societal systems began shaping their futures long before they reached adulthood. For noblewomen, marriage was rarely about love or personal choice. It was a strategic tool to consolidate power, secure alliances, and ensure the continuation of family wealth. Fathers and male relatives arranged unions that could bring together powerful clans or settle disputes between rivals. A woman's consent was secondary. Her value lay in her ability to strengthen her family's position. Once married, she moved into her husband's household, often leaving behind her home, friends, and familiar surroundings. This transition could be difficult, as she had to navigate the new family's expectations and political dynamics. In some cases, marriages were designed to maintain peace after conflicts or to create advantageous trade connections, with women serving as living guarantees of loyalty. Failure to produce heirs, particularly male heirs, could lead to humiliation or loss of status. Historical records show noblewomen occasionally resisting unwanted marriages, but such acts carried high risks, including exile or violence. The reality of arranged marriages highlights the paradox of nobility. While women appeared to occupy positions of privilege, their personal freedoms were severely curtailed, making their status dependent on obedience and usefulness rather than true autonomy. Despite their limited personal freedom, Viking noblewomen often held significant authority within their households. Managing estates required intelligence, resourcefulness, and organizational skills. They oversaw workers, controlled food storage, maintained trade relations, and ensured the smooth running of daily life. In the absence of men, especially during raids or wars, women sometimes took on expanded roles, managing finances and protecting property. This authority was recognized within the household but rarely extended into public or political life. Their influence was indirect, often exerted through persuasion, careful planning, and managing relationships. Some women became legendary for their ability to handle crises, negotiate conflicts, or maintain the family's wealth and reputation. Yet, even with this internal power, they remained vulnerable. Decisions were constrained by social expectations and the overarching control of male relatives or husbands. Their role was a balancing act. They needed to assert authority without threatening the established hierarchy. Understanding this duality, privilege within restriction, reveals how Viking noblewomen navigated a complex social structure. demonstrating intelligence and resilience while remaining largely bound by societal norms. Viking noblewomen had certain legal rights compared to lower-class women, but these were far from absolute. They could inherit property, manage dowries, and sometimes represent family interests in disputes. Sagas and law codes reveal that noblewomen could influence negotiations and even bring cases to local assemblies. However, these rights came with strict limitations. Legal protections were conditional and often dependent on male relatives, husbands, or allies. Inheritance laws favored male heirs, leaving women vulnerable if male family members were absent or hostile. Noblewomen could lose property or status if widowed without strong family support. Additionally, societal norms restricted their public behavior, speech, and mobility. Breaking these unwritten rules could result in social shame or legal penalties. These limitations highlight the tension between the appearance of rights and the reality of dependence. While they could wield legal influence, it was always circumscribed by the patriarchal framework of Viking society, making their autonomy fragile. Understanding these constraints sheds light on the precarious position of noblewomen. Wealth and status offered some advantages, but never complete security. The Viking world was violent, and noblewomen were not exempt from its dangers. While their status offered some protection, they remained vulnerable to domestic abuse, coercion, and political manipulation. Wars, raids, and feuds placed women at risk, sometimes turning them into hostages or bargaining chips. Within households, power struggles could result in threats or punishment if a woman challenged her husband or family authority. Historical sagas tell of women being forced into marriages or punished for attempting to assert independence. Even socially respected women faced the constant threat of violence if they defied expectations. This environment fostered a climate of fear and control, where survival often required careful negotiation, discretion, and obedience. Noblewomen had to balance ambition with caution, using intelligence and subtle influence to protect themselves, while navigating the dangerous political and social terrain of their world. Their resilience and strategies reveal how they survived in a society that prized male dominance and often disregarded female agency. The life of a noblewoman in Viking society carried significant emotional and psychological costs. While they were educated, wealthy, and influential within the household, the constant demands of duty, political obligations, and social expectations took a toll. Emotional bonds were often secondary to alliances, and personal desires were suppressed in favor of family strategy. Stories of women who resisted or defied their roles highlight the heavy price of autonomy, social isolation, familial rejection, or even violence. The pressure to produce heirs, particularly male heirs, added further stress, as failure could result in loss of status or humiliation. Some women found ways to exercise influence and preserve dignity, becoming skilled negotiators, estate managers, and advisors. Yet, the tension between outward privilege and inner restriction defined their experience. The veneer of power masked a life of careful calculation, compromise, and endurance. Understanding these personal costs provides a fuller picture of the human experience behind Viking nobility, revealing the resilience, intelligence, and courage required to navigate such a constrained and often dangerous world. Today, Viking noblewomen are often romanticized as strong, independent figures, thanks in part to popular media and heroic sagas. While some did achieve remarkable feats and left traces of influence, these stories can obscure the harsh realities of their lives. Historical evidence shows that behind the public image of wealth and status lay limited autonomy, political manipulation, and constant pressure to conform. Recognizing this complexity allows us to challenge myths about equality and freedom in Viking society. By examining their legal rights, household authority, marital obligations, and vulnerabilities, we gain a nuanced understanding of how noblewomen navigated power and restriction. Their legacy is one of resilience and adaptation in a patriarchal system that often denied them true independence. These women shaped their families and societies, even within the constraints imposed upon them. Reflecting on their lives invites us to reconsider assumptions about power, gender, and privilege in history, showing that nobility was never simply a guarantee of safety, respect, or freedom. Through this lens, we honor both their struggles and their remarkable strength. As we look back on the lives of Viking noblewomen, it becomes clear that wealth and status did not always equal freedom or safety. Behind the long houses, fine garments, and outward appearances of influence, lay a world shaped by obligation, control, and constant pressure to conform. These women navigated marriages as political tools, managed households with intelligence and skill, and endured threats and limitations imposed by a male-dominated society. Their stories reveal a side of history often hidden from view, a world where resilience and courage were essential for survival. By uncovering these truths, we challenged the myths of Viking equality and honored the real lives of women who lived, struggled, and adapted in a harsh and unforgiving world. Their legacy reminds us that power can be complex, and history often tells only part of the story. The next time we imagine Viking nobility, we should remember the women who endured the shadows behind the glory.